All right, here we go. I said earlier in the week on my podcast, a man cannot live on a diet of talking about the whip, no runners in races in Britain, and Frankie Dettori alone. So we've tried to spice it up a bit, but we will start with Frankie Dettori because there was more news this week, Lee, that he was going to extend it. Well, he might. I don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to retire, not retire, extend beyond the Breeders' Cup?
So Frankie is on this farewell tour, the majority of which so far has taken place in California, based in Santa Anita. And I think it's very fair to say that up to now, it has been enormously successful. Yeah. Frankie has been doing great things at Santa Anita, riding loads of winners.
And very lucrative, I should think, as well.
Very lucrative, yeah. Had a great day yesterday in Saudi Arabia. And speaking in Saudi this week, Nick, he intimated that the common belief, based on what Frankie and his team have said, that they would end at the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita, might not necessarily be the case. Now, he was only talking about maybe nudging it 3 days on to the Melbourne Cup, which I know has got many of my friends in Australia very excited indeed. Seems to me slightly unlikely because fewer and fewer internationals are running in the Melbourne Cup. It's not a place he's had enormous success in the past, and I think California will still be the obvious place. But in a wider sense, people have been saying, well, actually, should Frankie be thinking about going on into next year as well?
Yeah, he seemed to push that back a little bit.
He seemed to push it back, but
one thing he has got a keen eye on is ticking off all these gaps, isn't he? So he doesn't want a Melbourne Cup. He doesn't want a July Cup, which he desperately wants.
Yeah.
And of course, I know the Saudi Cup's very new, but he hadn't won that. And I think, even though he's won a ton of money last night, he really wanted that as I've won the world's richest race, whatever. So I sort of get it from a kind of emotional point of view as well as a financial. Where are you going to do when it comes? Where are you going to do your tour?
I won't be doing a tour. I think I'll just wake up one day and the weight battle will be just a little bit too much, and I'll think that'll do me.
Did you think Tom Skew did it the right way? Just woke up and said, right, I'm not falling like that again, thanks.
Do you know what? When that happens, I've had a lot of smashes throughout my career, and fair play to him. It was just unfortunately just one fall too many.
Right, let's talk about the Grand National weights a little bit more. What did you want to major on here, Lee?
Two things really. One, again, we had Martin Greenwood, the official handicapper for the Grand National. Mm-hmm. He made some pretty strong comments a few weeks ago about how the Grand National entries, the dominance of Irish entries over British entries, reflected the current state of the jumps industry in Britain. And a few people, Dan Skelton was very vocal in expressing displeasure with how Martin had spoken about British jump racing at that time. He didn't so much double down on his comments at the Grand National Weights lunch in Liverpool on Tuesday, but he didn't backtrack either. He stressed that the weights as they look now are very disappointing if you are a fan of British jump racing. The numbers here I've got here, Nick. Ireland have 18 of the top 20. 30 of the top 20 of the top 41. There was a suggestion that based on the current numbers, Team GB, if you like, can expect to have 10 to 12 of the 40 runners in the Grand National. Now, I don't think anybody could say that is a desirable situation to be in. And it's a pretty grim picture, I think, if you are a fan of British jump racing going in to the Grand National. But having said that, it's not necessarily Britain against Ireland in these weights. It's Britain against Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott, because those two stables will have a huge percentage of the runs in the race.
And we were going to talk about Ted Walsh.
Yeah, so Ted wasn't happy with the weight allocated to any second now, right there.
And very few trainers with a horse with a big weight in the Grand National are ever happy with their weight. But should we support his unhappiness, or has Martin Greenwood got this right?
Well, I think the unhappiness there is linked to the fact that they don't see him as a Grade 1 horse, whereas Noble Yates now would be billed as a Grade 1 horse going into the Gold Cup, and they're on the sort of same position. But having said that, if you look at any second now relative to Noble Yates in last year's Grand National, when I think he was giving him £12, that has been wiped out now. So he's pretty well handicapped compared to Noble Yates. And we shouldn't forget as well that when the handicapper is framing the Grand National weights, that entry factor is still factored into the weights, even though
to a lesser
degree, and understandably so, because as Daryl has made clear earlier on, the Grand National is a different race to the race that Phil Smith started handicapping when that entry factor was a big deal.
And the point is, I can see on a sort of visceral level, Ted sees a huge weight for this horse, and he says, I don't think this is a Grade 1 horse.
Yeah.
But the facts before the handicapper are that the horse has run to something like 170 in the Grand National last year on a strict weights and measures point of view.
167 the time before.
Yeah, 167 the time before. That, as you say, he's better off with Noble Yates, and the evidence that he's had on subsequently are a hurdle race and a run in a Grade 1 chase, which was a kind of preparatory run.
Can't really use that, can you?
So, whilst you can understand the visceral response, what's on the page, I think, entitles the handicapper to do what he's done.
Yeah, and in general terms, any handicapper will tell you in relation to any race, the more evidence they have before them in terms of runs in the book enables them to handicap a horse more accurately. So if, as with this instance, with any second now, you haven't actually got much fresh evidence to go on, you have to base it on what you've got in the past.
I'd love to see the horse win, though, Daryl.
Yeah, he's a lovely horse. He goes around there, doesn't he? He skips around there, and
been a bit unlucky more than once as well.
Well, he has, yeah. But I mean, he deserves to win it, doesn't he? He deserves to win one, and he just seems to float around there, doesn't he?
He'd be the Durham edition of the of the 2020s. Always wanted him to win, and he never quite did.
No.
Royal ownership. Might the King and the Queen Consort have a runner in the Grand National one day? Not impossible.
No, it's not impossible. No.
Might have a Cheltenham winner.
Yeah, they might. And that jumping was what we associated the King and the Queen Consort with before the Prince of Wales became the King. And when that happened, Nick, when Her Majesty the Queen died, the royal horses passed into the ownership of the King, and they raced in the name of the King, and actually with considerable success in those first few months. It was announced this week that in future those royal horses will race in the name of His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the Queen Consort, which I think in many ways is logical. I don't think anybody would attempt to pretend that the King is anywhere near as interested in horse racing as his mother was. He had some interest in the sport as an amateur jockey.
There's almost no one who was as interested in racing
well, no,
as the Queen
not,
was.
No. And the Queen Consort wouldn't be either, but she's much more interested than her husband. She loves horse racing. She's a genuine fan of horse racing. She might not have the Queen's detailed
Especially
knowledge.
jumping, I'd say. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So in future, those horses will race in the name of the King and the Queen Consort. And I thought one thing that was really interesting that John Warren, the Royal Racing Advisor, said this week was something he said to me when I spoke to him before the Queen's funeral last year, was that he said the great tragedy of this is that he thinks the Queen bred her best ever group of horses, that the horses going into training as 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds this year are probably the finest royal crop of horses she ever bred, and that he does anticipate huge success this year. And if there was huge success for the King and the Queen Consort on the track in 2023 and 2024, that'd be fantastic news for sport.
Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, is just test positive for COVID. So, ma'am, if you are watching, do get well soon. COVID positives, incidentally, are reported only in 2 places now, Daryl and Lee. One is out of Buckingham Palace. The other one, our production gallery, where our producer still holds the record for most cases of COVID.
How many times?
We're well into double figures now.
Really?
Yeah.
Good effort.
Blimey.
I know, back to back. He could do a Delta and an Omicron double in no time at all. God, you must be pleased to be out of that now in the weighing room, aren't you?
Yeah, that was messy, wasn't it? It was boring. It was just so dull. I mean, just you love the crowds, the cheering, the buzz, the electric of what racecourses and all that bring to it, and just going around there like riding in races, and it was just
total silence.
Just total silence. Yeah. But I suppose, we have a good bit of a laugh during the races and stuff like that. So, at least with the noise and all that, people couldn't hear what we were saying.
Lee's a man who's got his hotline to all the corridors of power, not just His Majesty and Her Majesty, but also the Prime Minister. The racing did get quite a chunky message from the Prime Minister this week.
And it came as a surprise. Nick, you were there. I was still flying back from Oz, but at the Thoroughbred Industry Employee Awards.
York Racecourse Monday night.
York Racecourse Monday night. I believe from what I heard, it began with a video message recorded by the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Well, it didn't. It began with a recorded message from Ollie Bell, who'd clearly just come out of the gym.
Right.
And then one from...
Ollie in the gym? No chance.
I said it looked like you just come out of the gym, and he went, yeah, I just come out of the gym.
Of course it did,
So Ollie came before the Prime Minister?
Well, Ollie first, and then it was sort of... Then Ed and AP.
Ed and AP.
They did a little thing together, little two-header.
Yeah.
And then he thought, well, that's as good as the celebrity count's going to get. And in comes the Prime Minister.
In comes Rishi.
Yeah. Not Prasad.
No, not Prasad, Mr. Sunak. And I won't quote all of it, but he said, Nick, tonight's finalists exemplify all that is best about British racing and breeding. An industry that does so much for communities across our country, generates over £4 billion for our economy, and showcases Britain on the global stage. It was good to hear.
But that's not the most important bit of what he said.
Go on.
The most important bit of what he said, which I did think was well briefed, or at least well intentioned, was that he then name checked Becky Smith, who is one of his own constituents in Middleham, who was one of the finalists for one of the awards, and of course there'd been a Middleham winner of the overall thing last week. I thought that was quite good. Yeah,
to be fair, I mean, the stable staff and everyone in the racing underneath, they do the job like Dickie summed it up. I mean, the job that they do is incredible. You know, the love, the care that they have for them horses. I mean, us jockeys, you know, we take a lot of passion from it, but you know, the stable staff and stuff like that, 7 days a week, Nick. They're in there 6 o'clock, 5:30 every morning, there till 7 o'clock in the evening time. Unbelievable.
And you were saying earlier, I thought that was quite sweet when they give you grief for going and messing their horses up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they do.
Oh, not him again. He's coming into right
pets,
work.
Yeah, they're pets, and they you know, their love for the horses. I mean, you know, the beddings, and they literally get 5-star treatment. These race horses, and like you say, we'd be lost without the stable staff that we have. And you know, I'm delighted that they're getting all the publicity that they deserve and more. Mind, they should get more. You know, even I'd love to see them at the race courses. You know, the race courses, you know, really, you know, with every groom and all that leads up, you know, a little bit more invested into them. I'd love to see that, you know, down along the line.
And the interesting point here is that you know, Sunak was making an interesting intervention. Okay, somebody had asked him to do it, but he didn't just say, yeah, good luck to all the stable staff. He made the point about the contribution of racing's workforce to the overall economy. And this is important because as we move on to our next talking point and your latest surveys into affordability and so forth,
yes,
the sport wants to know that this government, however short its lifespan might now be until the next election, is going to do something to safeguard racing's financial future.
And I'll come back to that point after we've done these numbers, Nick. There's no way I can remember all these numbers, so I've brought my tablet out. Yeah, the Racing Post conducted a survey of readers, 10,400 plus across Britain and Ireland, were asked questions about their gambling habits, and in particular in relation to affordability checks, which have been the hot topic for so long now. Some of the numbers here were that 16.6% of those 10,400 people said they had already been asked by their bookmakers to submit themselves to affordability checks, 8.9% by one bookmaker, 7.7% by multiple bookmakers. 55.3% of those people declined to do that, and as a result of declining to do that, they wouldn't have been allowed to carry on betting. Some of the notable numbers too, Nick. 22.1% said they were now considering using black market bookmakers, and 66.3% said that their betting had decreased significantly as a result of what's been going on in the last year or so. It's really important because we know we still haven't had the gambling white paper. We do now have a sports minister in place, it seems, which will presumably be helpful. It's taken a long time to name.
We now know that the gambling minister is also the sports minister. Yeah.
Probably took a while because just everybody else had a good go at the job already, and there aren't many left who haven't done it. So really important. And just going back to Rishi Sunak's intervention, which is important, linked to the fact that we haven't had the review yet, and we are hoping the government will look favourably on racing. My colleague Bill Barber wrote a really interesting column in the Racing Post this week, in which he stressed how positive it was that Rishi Sunak had intervened. However, it is with the opposition that racing should almost now be concentrating its interests. If you look at the current polls, it is seems to me long odds on that Sir Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister within 2 years. And if you look at the polls, there will be a huge Labour majority, which won't necessarily delight everyone in the racing participant class. I remember you, Nick, speaking at a ROA Awards just before the last...
do you remember that? And I said the exit poll says there's going to be a Tory majority of 80, and the room erupted.
Yeah, and you all said the whole, Jeremy Corbyn, they didn't join in with you.
Yeah.
Racing traditionally has not been a Labour supporting sport, but there will almost certainly
But there have been plenty of Labour MPs who are massive racing fans.
Huge fans. And there will be, it looks almost certain, a big Labour majority government after the next election. Sir Keir Starmer would have been at Doncaster on St Ledger Day had the Queen not died last year. He's got interest in racing. I remember being at an all-party event before Christmas where the Culture Secretary's shadow...
You've got a line into Keir as well.
Nice man. No, I haven't. No.
He's the best connected man in the sport.
But yeah, there will almost certainly will be a Labour government, and I don't think that racing should fear that in the way that it maybe has in the past.
All right, let's talk about the ground at Cheltenham rather more prosaically, but probably rather more importantly in the immediate term. Daryl, John Pullen's been saying he's struggling with the dry spell, but I thought it was warming up, but it was 2 degrees when I landed this morning, so it needs to warm up a bit more, doesn't it, to get some growth?
The last couple of days have been cold. I was in Nicky's yesterday morning. It was cold there. It was 1 degree there when I went in there yesterday morning. We've struggled really all winter with the ground, haven't we?
What's it like now? I mean, what was Kempton like yesterday?
Oh, to be fair, Barney does a great job. The ground yesterday was on the slow side, good to soft. It was dead. He done a great job. He always does mind. He's incredible. He does a really, really good job.
But it wasn't quick. You'd have run any horse.
No, you'd run any horse there yesterday, no problem at all. He got it to a T yesterday. Very, very difficult. I'd hate to do their job. But even at coming back in at the start of the year, I remember like September, October, it was all quick ground right nearly up and through until sort of Christmas, and then we had that 3 weeks where it just absolutely bucketed down, and then it was heavy, but then it just dried out so quickly. I mean, Nico was giving me the whole thing about the water tables. He was giving me a good lesson on the water tables and this and that and the other, and he's very knowledgeable. But I was just like, Nico, literally that's just gone straight over my head. just the crack and the banter that we have. But a lot of the race courses, to be fair, have struggled all winter with the rain and the water and stuff like that. I mean, look at Newbury last weekend.
Have you been in Nico's plunge pool yet?
No. No.
It's got a plunge pool.
No, he goes in this freezing cold water thing.
It's just Nico. Just Nico being Nico. Okay. That's basically what it is.
And what is that?
Exactly. What is that? You've nailed it there, Nick. What is that?
Well, he's still in front of you for Grade 1 winners.
Yeah. Well, I have to sit beside him every Cheltenham, and I'm just like, well on Nico. And I'm sitting beside him, and he's got the champagne left, right and centre coming in, and he actually said, would you like that as a consolation? A bottle to me. Well, but yeah.
You didn't take it, did you?
No, I didn't, no. But it was, we have great fun, me and Nico. He's a gas man.
Now, he'll have plenty of Grade 1 winning opportunities next month. You'll have a good few, I'd say. We'll come to that in a minute. One man who's just been given one is Mihal Nolan, who's been part of the furniture at Philip Hobbs's for a while. It's soon to be Philip Hobbs's and Johnson White's. And he's been given the run on Time Hill because Tom O'Brien's been injured. Get well soon, Tom. I know you wanted to say a little bit about this. Yeah, do you know what? In this day and age where, you go back to, my days with the boss and stuff like that, loyalty, the boss is Robert Allman, for those who, and always will be.
Always, yeah, exactly. It was always the yards when I came over, and even in Ireland, when I started out in Ireland, a yard had their stable jockeys and their jockeys rode out. And I know through the years that all of that has changed, but, fair play to Philip Hobbs and his team down there. He's always had, Richard, Tom O'Brien, and unfortunately Tom's got injured in this case, as well as James Bowen, two high profile class jockeys who got injured. But the fact that, Philip could have had, any number of jockeys there, from England or Ireland that we, would love to to ride him, and him and the owners have stuck by. Micheál, he's been down there for for so long. He deserves an opportunity to shine on the big stage, and he's got a great opportunity here. And I know, and he's been cursed with injuries down through his career as well. He's had a lot of injuries, breaking his back and stuff like that. So he deserves this. And he was there at Kempton yesterday, and he was pumped. He was really excited about getting the opportunity. And I think he'll take this. Opportunity. And but I just love the way Hobbsy straight away turned around and said, unfortunately, Tom's not around, but I've got a great team of jockeys down here, and I'm willing to support him. And all credit to him and to his owners.
And he's got a chance as well. Proper Grade 1 horse in a year where that particular division doesn't look particularly strong. Those were this week's talking points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.